A long time ago, in a land far, far away, there lived a people who arose from a cold, mountainous region and spread far and wide. They spread to northern seas. They spread to southern deserts. They spread from the east to the west and overtook many who were there before them. This people left behind no record. They didn't write anything down, and very few archaeological traces point to their existence. So, how do we know for sure that they even existed at all? Is this just some fantasy? Is this just some story? No, we know for sure that they existed, and we know with relative certainty where they came from. The question of how we know that is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. In the 1800s, people started to notice, as people started to study languages more than they had before, that Latin and Greek bore a strikingly large number of resemblances. And hey, I suppose it's possible that since these cultures were in fact in contact, that they could have just borrowed these from each other, right? But here's the thing, they noticed another language that was even older than those two, and not in close contact with those two to any real extent, also bore a lot of similarities. And that language was Sanskrit, which was spoken, and to some degree still is, in India. Well, what's India now? And looking at the grammar, people observed that there was just no way that these three languages that on the surface seem very different could realistically have that much in common without a common ancestor. And then they started to look at other languages, mostly in Europe, but actually as far as Iran. And they found evidence in the grammar, in the words, in the letters and sounds of these languages that they came from a common ancestor. Let's take a look at some examples of how they figured this out. First thing is a man named Jacob Grimm. He's famous for being one of the two brothers Grimm. They wrote down a lot of German fairy tales. Noticed that Germanic languages like German and English tended to have words that were very similar to words that are in Latin. And that they do sound different, but those differences tend to follow patterns. For instance, in places where those words in Latin tend to have a P, in Germanic languages they tend to have an F. In Latin, where those letters tend to have a D or a T, in Germanic languages they tend to have a T or a TH. So for instance, in Latin there's the word pater. And in English, we have the word father. And that's just one example. There's plenty of others. For instance, the word Pisces, meaning fish. Well, in English, we have the word fish. And it corresponds to several sound changes that are consistent. And so that would be a little odd if it was a borrowed word, because borrowed words tend to be adopted by people who mishear them. And so you can't really predict what sound changes are going to occur. And we can go into that another time, how borrowings work, but for now, let's just take that at its face value. Consistent sound changes tend to match up with languages being related, but it goes further than just the lexicon, the dictionary of these languages. It goes into the very heart of the languages, the grammar and morphology. So, for instance, in languages that, not all languages, but the languages we're talking about, these languages descended from this theoretical language, which we call Proto-Indo-European, or IE for short. Another possible shortening is PIE, or Pi. That's the one I like. So let's take a slice of pie and look at some grammar. So, in this theoretical language of Pi, they have deduced that words that refer to a plural you doing something in the present that is a fact, meaning expressing a fact about a second party doing something that's in the plural. This is called second person plural present tense indicative, which is a long name. But they theorize that those words ended in ete. And for that to make sense, these various Pi languages have to demonstrate a connection in that. So let's take a look at some of them. For instance, Greek has ete. Okay, we're off to a good start here. For instance, a word which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, means to send forth is angelete. Okay. Latin does not have ete. What it has is e or a tis. An example of this is laudatus, which, although not the same suffix, is a very similar one. And we see that a lot. Old English had the suffix ath. You plural sing, the word for that was singeth. And we discussed earlier that in places where Latin has a T sound, Germanic languages tended to have a TH. So that makes sense. Sanskrit as well had a similar suffix. It was a or e tha. For instance, there was bhavatha, was a Sanskrit word. And another language that actually has one that harkens very closely back to that theoretical original suffix is Russian. The way to say you all understand is panimayete. There's that ete right at the end. So it seems very likely that this language of Pi existed. What this means is languages like Russian, Latin, English, French, Spanish, Greek, Persian, Hindi are all related. Granted, that relation is a long time ago, thousands of years, but it happened. It's real. And it's worth knowing about. It tells us a history that we couldn't get another way. Again, these people didn't leave behind historical records. Because they lived so long ago, there's very few artifacts that we found that could possibly be from them, and even then it's not really conclusive. Could have been from someone else. But we know they existed from linguistics, and that is one of the reasons why linguistics is so important, because it can teach us things that nothing else can. Not just about the way we speak, not even just about the way we think, but who we are and where we come from. We've learned that the Proto-Indo-European peoples are probably descended from a tribe that lived thousands of years ago in southern Russia near the Caucasus Mountains. And that's a fact that for many of you watching is something that you didn't know. And for many of you watching, maybe something you didn't know about your own ancestry. And that's amazing, and that's great. And that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Thank you very much for watching. Please, I love making these videos. I want them to reach as many people as possible. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much. Bye.